Welcome, everyone. This is Recovery Dharma. My name is Julia. I'm one of the facilitators of our practice. I'd like to begin our practice today by setting an intention. And this is a very classic thing to do in Buddhist practice, where you begin by acknowledging the motivation for being here, the intention. And then we end our practice by dedicating the merit, the goodness of having come together. I've made these little paintings, and this one reads, "May you see the divine everywhere. May you see the divine everywhere." For anyone joining this Buddhist practice, one of the things that makes the Spokane Sangha unique from many of the other Recovery Dharma groups is that we are really focused and committed on exploring and studying Buddhist practices and principles. That said, it's very important that people understand that to participate in recovery Dharma, there's a lot of people who say it's Buddhist inspired, not required. And that's absolutely true. You can be of any religious or spiritual persuasion and still benefit from the mindfulness practices that permeate recovery Dharma. I like to think of it this way. You don't have to become a bodybuilder to benefit from going to the gym. And you don't have to declare yourself a Buddhist or become a Buddhist to benefit from Buddhist practices and principles. And so there's a lot to learn here. There's all kinds of new language and new perspectives, and it takes a lot of humility to come into that awareness. So I want to begin our practice today. We're going to be exploring Shantideva's work. This is a continuation of a book that we've been reading for months and months. Shantideva was an 8th century monk who was living in India. He was studying at a Buddhist university there called Narlanda. And if you don't know anything about Shantideva, I just encourage you to read about him. He was such a radical character. And what he did was he took the Buddhist principles to heart and really made them come alive for himself. And he created this roadmap on how to be a good person, how to really be a practitioner and devote oneself to kindness and compassion, love, equanimity. And it became a well known writing called The Way to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so that's what we've been studying. And we're focused on relying on patience. That's the chapter we're going to listen to today. But before I launch into it, I want to share with you a quick story about patience, about humility, about learning new things. So many, many years ago, when I was a young woman and I had just started to practice yoga. And at the end of the yoga class, everybody was bowing, putting hands in prayer pose and bowing and saying a word I didn't know. And I just was looking around. Everybody knew, but I didn't know. And people were saying this word. I'm like, oh my God, what is anyone saying? I don't really get this. So I went to this yoga class at least 3 or 4 times, just bowing at the end, like, yeah, huh. And I did not have the courage to ask anyone, like, what are you all saying? Like, what is this fun, sweet little ritual? But I don't know the word. And I just did not have the humility. I did not have the courage. I to ask. So finally, I just was like, fuck it. I'm going to say whatever. First thing that comes to my mind. And so I'll share with you all as we begin this practice what I said loudly. because I was the owner of my life. Yoga practice, beautiful, beautiful. Everybody's ending the practice and we all bow to each other. Everyone, of course, is saying namaste, but I said Madagascar. So, Madagascar to all of us here today. Make it your own, people. Oh, and then I learned, I saw a poster and I was like, Namaste. That's what everyone's saying, Namaste. So it got worse before it got better. That's the nature of the practice, right? Patience, patience and humility as we learn these new things together, as we make fun of ourselves and laugh. Oh my goodness. Today, let's really rely on patience. This is Shantideva's work. This is a book that I've been using, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This is interpreted by Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. That's what he looks like. And this particular section, I'm going to read several verses, but the first part of this is a little bit let me say it to you this way. When I read this, the first chapters landed in my mind and heart as, oh yeah, this is something written way back then and they're trying to interpret this. But really what Shantideva is getting at and really looking at the heart of patience is whatever is happening in our lives that's testing our patience, challenging this innate virtue within us, reflects conditions. Nothing arises out of nowhere, is basically what he's reminding us. There's always conditions that create the presence of these challenges, the presence of these arisings. And sometimes what we can do is take our eye off the ball. We put all of our attention on the arising and we get swept away by it. And we forget to look at the conditions. What's underneath this arising, challenging my patience? Can I pause long enough to simply say, oh, would you look at this? My patience is being challenged. Huh, I wonder what's going on here. And the answer is most of us are like, no, I'm just pissed off and impatient. Screw it. And we go into the habit energy of reactivity. Shantideva is simply instructing us and reminding us, speaking to our Buddha nature that says, yeah, you can do something different. All effects arise from other conditions, which in turn depend upon previous conditions. Therefore, all things are like illusions. They are not independent. If we realize this, we shall not become angry with anything. If all things were like illusions, who would restrain what? Surely any restraint would be inappropriate. Shantideva, or the translator, has put that into italics. So this is meant to be somebody asking a question or somebody formulating a challenging thought. So if all things were like illusions, who would restrain what? Surely any restraint would be inappropriate. Shantideva writes, on the contrary, it is precisely because things lack inherent existence that it is possible to assert the continuum of suffering can be cut. It is possible to assert the continuum of suffering can be cut. Thus, whenever an enemy or even a friend commits an inappropriate action, such behavior arises from other conditions. Realizing this, I could remain with a happy mind. If things occurred independently, out of choice, then since no one wishes to suffer, how would suffering ever arise for any living being? Some misguided people inflict harm upon themselves by lying on thorns and the like, while others, obsessed with finding a partner, deprive themselves of food. Then there are those who inflict harm on themselves through non meritorious actions, such as hanging themselves, leaping from cliffs, swallowing poison, or eating bad food. Although they cherish themselves more than anything else, if under the influence of delusions, people are capable of even killing themselves, why should I be surprised when they inflict harm on other living beings, such as me? When those who, under the influence of delusions, set out to harm or even kill me, if I cannot develop compassion for them, at the very least, I should refrain from getting angry. If it were the very nature of a childish person to inflict harm on others, it would be no more reasonable to get angry with him than it would be to resent fire for burning us. On the other hand, if that if that harmless if that harmfulness were a temporary fault, and if that person were otherwise good-natured, it would be just as reasonable to get angry with him as it would be to resent space for filling with smoke. If someone were to harm us with a stick or other weapon, we would normally become angry with the person. But since his intent is governed by anger, it is really towards that anger that we should direct our wrath. In such situations, we could think, in the past, I harmed others in a similar manner. Therefore, it is fitting that I, who caused harm to others, should now be experiencing harm to myself. The physical suffering I experience is caused by both the stick and my body. But since the stick comes from my assailant and the body from me, which of these things should I get angry? Blinded by craving and ignorance, I have taken this form, the basis of human suffering, which can hardly bear to be touched. So with whom should I get angry when it is hurt? Although we childish beings have no wish for suffering, we are greatly attached to its causes. Thus, the harm we receive is entirely our fault. What reason is there to blame it on others? Okay. What I would like to insert here in this beautiful reading from this ancient time is an instrument of peace you've all heard me say probably a million times. And I'd like to say this is true and not the whole truth. So even if something resonates with you from what you heard today, stay open and say that resonates because it lands in my mind and heart is true. And it's not the whole truth. What else is true? If something landed in your heart and mind from this reading as really uncomfortable, stirring, maybe even not true, then I would encourage you to remind your own mind of, that feels untrue to me, and that feeling is true and not the whole truth. What else is true? This is a way of keeping the mind broad, keeping the mind subtle, keeping the heart open. Shantideva is coming from an environment deeply steeped in the Buddhist principle of karma, where what we reap in this life, what we experience in this life, is directly associated with what we sow. We don't always understand it. It's not always a one-to-one correlation, but the fruit of what I'm experiencing in life is because of the seeds, the karmic seeds I have planted in my mind stream since beginningless time. That's a basic Buddhist principle. And it's tricky territory. And so, as a Western person, I have to pause on that and think, while it's true, not the whole truth, what else is coming alive for me? And that practice alone requires so much patience. So, for the next few minutes of our practice, Shantideva, back in the 8th century, is bringing forward this awareness that we as human beings are going to encounter people and situations that are going to stir up feelings of anger. Either we're going to be subjected to someone's anger, or we ourselves are going to feel anger. And anger is one of those mind states that is enormously destructive to patience. We really have to practice deeply to maintain patience while in the conditions of anger. So, what he's reminding us, and what I would encourage for our practice, is remember that anger doesn't arise from nowhere in you or in someone else or in a situation. There's a lot going on that fuels it, a lot in the present moment, a lot in the past for an individual, but even more than that, it's a legacy. So when I feel anger, I'm feeling my mother's anger and my grandmother's anger, and so on, since beginningless time. And because I have encountered this practice, I have the good fortune of being able to explore the conditions defining my life and to maybe even contemplate the conditions of my ancestors. And in doing so, I create the conditions for healing of the past and the present, and what I bring forward into the future is the potential for something transformed. We all have this potential. In fact, it is our truest nature to do this. So allow something to arise for you, something that stirred up anger, and see if you can spend a few minutes with it, looking at the conditions. See if the conditions of blame are arising, defensiveness, being threatened. See if you can notice all kinds of things working together, and see if you can bring your equanimous spirit to it. friends. 2,600 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama tried on all of the religious practices and spiritual practices of the time that he was exposed to, and he decided to venture into his own way. And he had to encounter all kinds of challenges and tests, doubt. And he dedicated 40 years of his life to teach what he learned. We know it as the Dharma. And he gathered people together. People were very curious about him and his very peaceful manner. Um, Being in his presence was so calming and so softening. And then in the 8th century, this young man at a university studying the Dharma, really getting intimate with these practices, decided to do it his own way. And this is really the instruction of the Buddha, to take these practices and principles and use your life to bring them forward. Thich Nhat Hanh had a very famous statement, which is, your life is the instrument with which you practice truth. So it's very important that you take this in and see what comes alive in you with friendliness and curiosity. That's the practice. And it takes so much patience. So let's end our practice today. We're going to chant 3 times. This is a chant in honor of the Buddha. And if you know it, you can chant with me. This is the Shakyamuni Buddha chant, and we'll do it 3 times. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Beautiful. Thank you, friends. Madagascar. With a dedication of merit. All righty. Oh, let's come back to the body, to the mind, to the mood. Maybe close your eyes. I'm thinking about the 4 noble reminders in Buddhism. You have a precious human life. The nature of reality is impermanent. We are all subject to and working through karma. And then the 4th noble reminder is about the folly of samsara. This is about, this is basically habit energy. It is the way we repeat certain things over and over and over again, wanting, hoping for, expecting new things. And then we're shocked when the same old shit keeps happening. And so sometimes we have to be jolted awake to change, to really lean into impermanence, to really lean into change. And if you've been around long enough, you know that when you lean into impermanence, when you lean into change, both good things happen and bad. But with this practice, we are able to stay supple and strong, to go with this flow without any threat of drowning or losing our way. And so this gives our whole beings a kind of solidity and radiance that permeates and ripples through our presence. Not everyone has access to this yet. And so may you go into your day carrying the merit of this practice. May it present as radiance and warmth in your presence, the way you stand, the way you breathe, the way you have patience, the way you smile, the way your eyes twinkle, the way you flirt with somebody else's dog, the way you pay someone a compliment. So many ways to share the brilliance and beauty of your practice. May you have the courage to share it in a world so desperate to have it. Thank you for your beautiful practice today, friends. We'll see you next time. Madagascar.